Every day, hundreds of Sherman tanks are damaged on the battlefields of World War II. But here at Detroit Arsenal Hospital, our doctors and nurses are working hard to patch them up and get them back into combat. But it's not always easy. So you may be asking yourself, how can I help? Well, for less than the cost of a cup of coffee every day, you can buy the support equipment and trucks Detroit Arsenal Hospital needs to get the tanks back into action. Whether it's through surgery or first aid or even simply rehab, our staff works diligently to get those tanks back on the battlefield. Won't you please help? The Shermans are counting on you. Welcome everybody to another episode of Counterfactual Gaming. And today I am slamming these German divisions uselessly against the Poles in order to talk about something that I just discovered this past week. As you can see, the Germans, even though they are force attacking, are failing miserably to defeat the Poles. But that's not what's important today. What's going to be important today is what we're going to see once this force attack fails. Because what we're going to see today is that this tiny little hospital company is going to be saving the lives, not of soldiers or manpower, but of Panzer IVs that would otherwise be lost against the Polish army. But before we get started with all of that, I just want to remind everyone that if you like what you're seeing, you should go ahead and put a like and sub on the video so I can bring more of this Hearts of Iron stuff to you. And if you got any questions, comments, or complaints at just how poorly Kleist here is doing in his battle against the Poles, go ahead and put a comment down below. And I'll be sure and at least provide some kind of response. It may not be a good response, but it will be a response nonetheless. But for now, let's talk about hospital companies. Now, originally, when I was looking at hospital companies in my support company tier list, I rated them in the lowest possible tier for support companies, which of course is the but why though tier. And I put them in but why though tier with MPs because I couldn't find hardly any situations where it was better to use a hospital support company than something else. Part of the reason is because I don't value the manpower savings or the XP savings on divisions very much, with the other half being that it costs support equipment and trucks to save that manpower and experience on your divisions. And so the small countries that might want to save a little extra manpower are also the countries that may not be able to afford the extra support and trucks in order to do it. But Arms Against Tyranny changed the way hospitals work in one crucial respect. If you look at the tooltips here, you can see that the hospital support company now modifies all infantry, mote, and mechanized hit points by 10%. There's also a nice handy-dandy UI feature where if a support company only benefits certain battalions, it'll highlight the battalions that it's affecting. So in this case, I've moused over a hospital support company and you can see that it's applying its bonus to all those infantry battalions. Long story short, hospital support companies now boost the hit points of these infantry battalions, which changes the math on how losses are calculated. But in order to explain why hospital support companies can save tanks, we need to talk about how hit points and Hearts of Iron work. And to do that, we need to talk about pies. No, I'm not talking about tasty, delicious pies for the holidays, although that will be on our mind as we go through this because, hey, pie tastes good. But I'm talking about pie as an analogy for division templates. What do I mean by that? Well, take a look at this infantry division for a second. This infantry division template is like a pie. Everything in the division is contained in the shell of the pie. So this division right here we are looking at has 60 support equipment, 20 trucks, 910 infantry kits, 12 artillery, and 10,100 manpower. That is all the stuff we put into this pie. What the hit points are is the number of slices the pie is divided into. So what that means is that this division template in this configuration takes all of this equipment and manpower and divides it up into 251 slices. If we look at, say, this template, it takes 840 infantry kits and 6,000 manpower and divides it by 120 hit points. Why is this important? Well, this means that when divisions are taking damage to their strength, we're not talking about org here, org is different, strength damage, damage to hit points. Every hit point you lose takes away some of your manpower and some of your equipment, but 1 hit point's worth of damage is not equal. This division will take a different amount of manpower and equipment losses from this division, and from this division, raising the hit points of infantry-style battalions in the division designer takes almost the same amount of equipment. Not exactly the same, because the support company has its own support equipment and trucks, but almost the same amount of equipment, and slices it up into thinner slices because there are more hit points involved. And so hypothetically, when you increase your hit points, as long as you are not increasing the amount of equipment in the division by too much, or increasing the amount of manpower in the division by too much, that hit point increase should result in less damage per point of damage taken. Now, for those who are paying attention, you're probably thinking to yourself, infantry already has a lot of hit points. What about other types of battalions? Well, if we take a look, say, at this medium tank battalion, it only has 2 hit points. So when this battalion takes a point of damage, it's losing a ton of tanks. If it's not mixed in with motorized or mechanized, it's just going to get shredded by anything that does even a tiny bit of damage to it. If we take a look at, say, line artillery has even lower hit point values. It doesn't even have 1 full hit point. That's how low the hit point values are on artillery. Infantry battalions are the main source of hit points in most divisions. One of the things that I think Hearts of Iron 4 does really well is, instead of forcing you to use combined arms, it just encourages you to use combined arms, because creating a division of just tanks or just artillery is useless. The ratio we might argue about, but we all know you need at least some infantry in a division in order to give it stats that it needs. But when I read about the changes in Arms Against Tyranny, I initially discounted the value of hospitals because infantry already has a lot of hit points. Would adding a support company matter, given that the support company itself costs manpower and equipment? So I did some tests. And if we take a look at my save game list, just to show you how much testing that I did, you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different saves just for testing hospitals in various configurations. And I said to myself, well, okay, what's the best way to test hospitals? Well, obviously we need to compare templates that have hospitals and don't have hospitals. So I created like an infantry template that has no hospitals, an infantry template that has hospitals, and that's the only extra thing it has. And we attacked Poland as Germany, and attacked Polish divisions that are just pure infantry for all of these tests. But then I said, okay, that gives us some interesting results, but because org is a factor, we're not getting that many casualties. And so throughout many of these tests, what I ended up doing is, so I'd set up my divisions in this way. I would take a stack of my divisions, make sure they have a skill 2 general, order them to force attack the Poles, tagged Poland, make sure the Poles have a skill 2 general, put them on last stand so the battle will drag out for a certain number of days, and then run this down until it expired, and then check losses. And the reason I'm using force attack is this would generate a lot of extra casualties. Divisions on force attack don't lose that much org, they instead take more damage to strength. And because I'm using force attack and last stand on the poles, that means I can guarantee 7 exact days of constant combat where no one is retreating, no one is reinforcing to width, and nobody is stopping the attack earlier. It allows for very consistent results. Remember, I'm not testing whether divisions win or lose. I just want to look at their losses and see if the losses with hospitals are better than the losses with no hospitals. And then I ran the attack several times in multiple configurations in order to see just what kind of results we got. With infantry divisions, and as you saw, these were 16 width infantry divisions. One set had no hospitals, the other set had hospitals. And if we take a look at the comparison of the results, here's what we see. We see that with hospitals, we took around 500 fewer casualties. With hospitals, we lost less infantry kits, but we did lose support equipment and extra trucks because they didn't have any trucks or support equipment to lose. Now, clearly, the hospitals reduced the manpower casualties. But did we save equipment by using the hospitals? Well, no hospitals cost us 403 infantry kits, which translates to 201.5 production cost. Now, the division with hospitals lost 281 infantry kits, which translates to 140.5 production cost. It lost 11 support equipment, which is 41 production cost, and lost 7 trucks, which is 17.5 production cost, for a total of 202 production cost, which is technically more equipment lost than the no support company, but given how RNG works in Hearts of Iron 4, 201.5 versus 202 production cost is within what I would consider to be the scope of RNG. And yes, these numbers were a little bit different as I did tests. These are just sort of the middle of the road result. Okay, so we're saving a significant amount of manpower, but we're not saving equipment with infantry divisions. If we were using fatter infantry divisions, say 35 with infantry divisions, because with fatter divisions, the support company buffs are more cost efficient. You're using the same amount of equipment to buff way more battalions. And so then I said to myself, would this work with panzer divisions? And my guess is it probably wouldn't work, but I had to test it out anyway. So I whipped up a quick 16 combat with panzer division with some support companies. I said, okay, we're going to make this the no hospital version. And then I made this the hospital version. Again, the only difference is that the hospital version has a hospital support company. The no hospital version doesn't have it. Now, I don't normally make panzer divisions this small, but I know lots of people do, so it's definitely worth testing. And we use the same parameters where I put skill 2 generals in charge and use force attack against the poles. Same conditions as the infantry. Now, this is normally the part where I would show you a bunch of side-by-side results. However, for some reason, only when using the skinny panzer divisions did I get wildly inconsistent results. If you're looking at these results, you're probably thinking the left results are with hospitals and the right-handed results are without hospitals. However, that's not the case. Multiple tests saw the result on the right come from skinny panzer divisions with hospitals. I don't know why they are suffering so many extra Panzer IV casualties. This happened multiple times. The results on the left were very consistent results from the no hospitals. I did get some other results from hospitals with skinny panzer divisions that had less Panzer IV losses, but the majority of tests I did had those results on the right. That means that at the skinny panzer division level, we're talking like, 14 to 20 width, there's either a bug that causes hospitals to not function correctly, or There's a weird issue with RNG, even though I did close Hearts of Iron and restart it so that, it would get a new seed for tests. Or there's just some sort of weird loophole that causes wildly inconsistent results. Long story short, if you're going to use hospitals, I'm not sure I would recommend them in skinny panzer divisions because either there's a bug or they just don't work well for some reason I can't possibly explain. So I said, let's look at big fat panzer divisions instead. So I created these 32 widths. Now, if I was doing like real warfare in Hearts of Iron 4, I would unlock enough doctrines to add the bottom row of battalions, and I would make this closer to 35 width. But right now we're just testing fat versus skinny. We're not trying to optimize division width for terrain. So this is a division that's twice as big as the divisions we were just using. No hospitals here, and of course I have hospitals here. And how did these turn out? Well, as you can see here, with no air power, the difference is almost negligible. Now, the hospital panzer division with no air power involved is a little bit better than the panzer division with no hospital. But we don't see real differences until we look at air power being applied to the tile. And if we look here, we can see that we have 407 Panzer IVs lost with hospitals versus 454 Panzer IVs lost without hospitals, with other equipment differences as well. The only equipment category that the hospital division does worse in is support equipment, which we would expect because the hospital company adds more support equipment. Now, if we total up the actual cost of all of this equipment, the Panzer Division with hospitals lost 9,228 production costs worth of equipment, whereas the Panzer Division with no hospitals lost 10,080 production cost worth of equipment. Note that this is with the Panzer IV that you see displayed on the screen right now, a very basic, non-meta Panzer IV that just has a moderate cost, so we can measure this impact in Panzer Divisions. But it's a clear win in terms of IC cost and in terms of manpower loss, regardless of trickleback or XP loss in the division. Now, the question some of you are probably asking yourself right now is it better than using a maintenance company? Because if we take a look at the maintenance company, it should be giving us a substantial reliability bonus. At Tier 3, it'll be a 15% reliability bonus. And the results I got for maintenance companies were even worse than no hospitals. Even weirder, Theater View showed no equipment recovered, which is weird because higher reliability across the whole division should result in more equipment recovered. And I did do a couple of tests where I retreated the poles off the tile and let the Germans take it so that the Germans quote-unquote won the battle and should have gotten equipment back, and they didn't. So I'm not sure if that's because the impact of the maintenance companies is so small it couldn't be tallied in Theater View, or if it's because there's a bug or the UI isn't showing me something. What I can tell you is that, as far as I can tell, maintenance companies are not saving nearly as many tanks as hospitals are. So if you're looking to preserve tanks from combat losses, and let me make that clear, combat losses, you should be using hospitals. So with all of that in mind, when should we use hospital companies? Let's go to the chart and take a look. It's not too hard to decide when to use them. You need to use hospital companies in 1. Situations with high battlefield casualties. Remember, the hit points only help when the division is taking combat damage. So, if you're in situations where your divisions aren't taking a lot of combat damage anyway, hospitals aren't going to help you out too much. If you want to win harder, you may forego the hospital in exchange for something more offensive so you can end battles sooner. But if you're getting seriously damaged by enemy fire, hospitals are certainly a solid choice. 2. You want to use them in divisions with no less than 40% infantry battalions. I didn't show it on camera, but I did make some glass cannon panzer divisions, and the hospitals had far less impact on them. And if you've seen me live stream, you know sometimes I'll do like 75% tanks in a panzer division because I'm going all in on offense, and I don't care about how much damage those panzer divisions are taking. In those situations, hospitals aren't as useful because they can't proc their bonus off as many infantry battalions. 3. It doesn't seem to be worthwhile in Space Marines. I didn't show this in the video, but I did some tests with Space Marines, and casualties with Space Marines between hospitals and no hospitals were very, very minimal. And I think that's a function of how few armored vehicles are in a Space Marine division, so you're not saving tanks this way. You might decide you want to use it to save manpower, but if you're thinking, oh, the hospital company will save me a ton of tank destroyers, you're not going to see the savings that you think you will. 4. Use a hospital company if you don't want or need terrain buffs from another support company. I don't put it in a higher tier in my tier list, even with this new discovery about hit points, because there are going to be times with your offensively minded divisions where you care less about the casualties and you care more about terrain bonuses. Because if you can get those terrain bonuses, you will win harder and faster and defeat the enemy. You can have all the hospitals that you want and save all the tanks from destruction that you want, but if it takes another 12 months to beat the Soviet Union, you've given the Soviet Union another 12 months to build equipment to fight you with, and maybe you would just rather cross rivers faster by using engineers, pioneers, and using flame tanks to go through woods and forts and urban terrain. Again, hospitals are defense-oriented, so you shouldn't be using them if it's going to cut too much into your offensive-oriented buffs for terrain. And number 5, we need to remember hospitals provide no benefit in high attrition situations. They do not reduce attrition. If you don't believe me, take a look at this screen cap from the wiki. As you can see, there is nowhere in the attrition formula where hit points matter. Also, you don't lose manpower in attrition, so casualty trickleback doesn't matter in that situation either. If you have a high attrition problem, that needs to be solved through better logistics, maintenance companies, or better reliability in general on your gear. And that about wraps it up. And as I'm here attacking the Poles with my Space Marines and losing horribly as the Polish Air Force destroys us, I wanted to just say thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I hope this has been helpful to you. I was certainly surprised that hospitals have much more utility than they used to have prior to Arms Against Tyranny coming out. They're certainly not a super support company now, but they have moved up in my estimation from but why though tier all the way up to niche tier. They certainly have a niche that they can fill, but they are not to be used all the time. Now where I live, it's currently gray and kind of cool. I hope it's better where you live. I'm not sure about my posting schedule here over the next couple of weeks. I've got at least 1 or 2 things I want to do. More on that later. But until I post something else next time, I hope you're having a pleasant day, and I will talk to all of you later.